So my name is Kalanjay Dhir, or Cal. I'm an artist based in Parramatta or Parramatta on unceded Dharug Land, and I'm here in between Wentworth Point and Rhodes to talk about my exhibition Immersion, Homebush Bay Patch at Wentworth Point Community Centre and Library. Immersion is a series of works, largely video and sculptural, but it's kind of centred on performance where I swam in the Parramatta River in the kind of Parramatta CBD initially. Then I gamified that kind of viewing experience. It was a way of me problematizing those kind of questions I was asking myself about a relationship to the river and also trying to communicate with the river. My connection to the river is something that has really inspired this work. I've lived on the river since my parents moved there in the mid-90s. I always tell this story when I'm talking about the work. My family practiced Hinduism and we would follow my dad to take like our dead pets or other kind of dead animals around our backyard to the river, and we would put their bodies in the river and pray for them. And for us, the Parramatta River emulated the Ganges. And it wasn't until I became a teenager or later an adult where I started to actually understand that I actually had never visited the Ganges or the Ganga. And this work was a means of me beginning to question that relationship and understand what it means for a settler to project their own spiritual connection to a river. So the motivations behind Immersion were kind of twofold. The main motivation was definitely a kind of irony of living next to a body of water and realizing that the norm was that you can't swim it, you can't fish, which is something that you grow up with as the norm, but when you kind of uncover a little bit, you realize it's a very new relationship to the river. And so the work was really motivated by uncovering those kind of histories, and then I guess thinking about what would a future relationship to the river look like. And I guess the second major motivation of Immersion was thinking about, I guess, the agency of the river, or the river's agency. And this is something I'm still kind of researching and trying to understand. But I was looking at things like in New Zealand or Aotearoa, the Whanganui River, which was granted legal personhood in 2017, or even the Ganges, how it's kind of revered in Hinduism as the Ganga Mata or the Mother Ganges. In religion or in cultural practices, there was a reverence of the river, and that reverence was often a kind of deification or personification of the river. And that reverence was a way of respecting the natural waterway and actually learning how to live with it as opposed to using it as a resource. And I think, we're at a point now where the river is of course polluted, and so the work and gamifying it was really trying to think about talking to the river in its current condition and thinking about, if this river is an entity, what would they say? What's the kind of future relationship going to look like? My hope for the river is, of course, a river free of pollution. I think kind of wishing it returned to its state before industrialization and colonialism is maybe a complicated thing to hope for. But I hope for a river that's not just a landscape or not just kind of a thing that Parramatta is around, but rather a functional part of life and of how Parramatta runs, and being able to swim in the river. So I was excited to create a version or patch of Immersion for Homebush Bay, particularly because it is a site with a very complicated relationship to the river as a kind of large industry drain, but also there's obviously a lot of new development here, there's a lot of new communities here, and they have this kind of waterfront view. So it was really interesting to, I guess, highlight the history of the river, and question, why things are here and why they are the way they are now. And then I guess the next step would be, what could a future relationship to the river and the bay look like now?